It's time to talk about Pixies' Doolittle.
Things are gonna change, I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens.
You know it. Welcome back to Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens. I'm here. I'm doing it. Doing it again. Here we go. One more time. No, many more times. This show just will keep going forever. As long as music is being made, I will make this show. If I run out of all the bands that I grew up with, then I'll just turn to bands that my parents grew up with and my grandparents, and then what you're growing up with now is just never going to end. So get used to it. Can come hang out. But I have been thinking lately, it'll be so cool when I can start bringing in more guests and talking to people who make music, work in music, people you've heard of, people you haven't heard of. I know that's going to be a lot of fun once I get to that point. So it's just going to grow and grow and grow, I think. And then eventually the dream will come true and I will have a record store called Waterproof Records where you can come in, drink some of my homemade mead. Yeah, I make mead. Have I talked about that on the show yet? I don't know. I think I did. A little bit, right? Right? If you didn't know, I make my own mead. And that's like a new thing that I just started doing kind of at the start of this year, 2021. It's very cool. It's very fun. I like making it. It's nice and simple and straightforward. If you don't know what mead is, it's basically made from honey. And so I had always wanted to make beer. I'd always wanted to brew my own beer. But I've known many people in my adult life that are beer brewers, and from what I gathered, I may be wrong, but there was some equipment to invest in, and there was a kind of a learning curve, and if you blew it, if you messed up your batch, you'd just have to dump all your beer, and things could go wrong really easily, and it was just, the whole process, it sounded like, until I have a lot of free time, my kids are grown up, I don't know if I can do it. But mead is nice and straightforward and simple. It's a 30,000-year-old beverage. That's amazing, right? It predates beer and wine. And so it's just basically honey, yeast, and water. And you just got to be patient. So I figured out how to do that, and I've made a bunch of batches already, and I've shared them with friends, and so far so good. None of them have been bad, well, in my opinion. I mean, some I think are stronger or more very unique tasting, but some have turned out incredibly. So I'm hoping I can get to a point where I can make and sell my own mead in my record store. Wouldn't that be cool? Waterproof Records, homemade mead. Anyway, I started us off on the Pixies Doolittle episode just talking about drinking mead, and we should just be talking about music, right, guys? Also, I've been trying to get things right. The last episode, I think my camera was out of focus the whole time, so bear with me as I work out the kinks and we get kinky. Less kinky, more kinky. All the kinks. Not the band, the Kinks. Pixies. Okay. If you know about Pixies, they're a huge, iconic band, and more than anything, they're really at the forefront, the beginning of that specific alternative music kind of coming to an end in the 1980s and going into the 1990s. And then they break up and they influence everybody's music. I mean, the Pixies influenced everybody. It was huge. And it's funny because you will get in trouble for saying the Pixies. I got in trouble. And I mean, I've been a fan of this band since I was 12 years old, and I still mess it up because it's just really easy to refer to the band and say the Pixies. It just flows, right? But it's Pixies. Technically, it's Pixies. On my Nirvana reaction video, I was referencing the Pixies, and I said the Pixies, and somebody got really mad, and they said, "You're a fake fan." Ugh, people, you guys. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you right now. 99% of the comments I get on my videos are amazing, but I got to tell you, it takes every fiber of my being sometimes to not react and get so frustrated at the negative comments or somebody being a total music elitist. It drives me crazy. If you notice that I don't really engage with them, that's because with every fiber of my being, power I have, I resist the urge to engage with trolls and music elitists and people who are telling me I don't know anything about music. Or anyway, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Maybe I'm kind of venting a little bit with you guys. It's really not that bad. I'm telling you, I have cultivated the most positive, amazing music lovers. And that's what I like to say. I actually said this to a guy the other day. I said, I'm a music fan, not a music snob. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a music lover. That's my thing. I don't pride myself on being like, well, this is better than this. And the 7-inch single that came out in 1992 is clearly their best work. That's just not me. Sure, there's bands I don't like, but why spend too much time or energy on talking about something you don't like? Why not spend all your time and energy on talking about things that you love? And that's what I'm doing. And you know what? There might be something that during this process, somebody shows me a band or a song, and I don't quite get it. I mean, remember on the singles episode, how I talked about Paul Westerberg? That was a perfect example of an artist and song that at that age I wasn't ready for. But now I am. Now I'm ready for it. And oftentimes I get a question about how do I feel about 90s hip hop and rap. And I got to say, that question I get asked all the time, but my challenge is this. I didn't listen to it growing up, and that had a lot to do with my environment. You really are thrown different types of artists and songs because of where you grew up and the people that you surround yourself with. And so for me personally, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, let's just put it this way. I was extroverted. I was theatrical. I got into musicals. I was in theater. I was in drama. I was an artist. I had a lot of expressions. And in the 90s, in that part of the country, kids don't know what to do with that. And words were thrown around, and I didn't feel very safe amongst a lot of the quote unquote popular kids, I guess you could say. And so I gravitated towards other artists, other weirdos, other people who liked the kind of music I did. And then once I found my theater community, I was set till I graduated. But because of that, a lot of the kids, a lot of the boys my age that may have been like macho or tough or playing sports or very aggressive would have been more linked to some of the hip hop and rap music, right? So when I'm young, I'm kind of like, that puts a bad taste in my mouth because I'm thinking to myself, this represents the people that are jerks in my town, in my culture, in my environment. And so it wasn't given a fair shake. So I gravitated towards, alternative rock, metal, all that kind of music, grunge, because it really was what I needed to get through adolescence, right? You need your music and your bands to get through your adolescence. But as I've gotten older, oh, wow, so many artists that I've heard, the lyrical genius, the structure of the song, just how creative, and I'm learning so much more. And I hope that maybe you can teach me and others can teach me what I missed out on, what artists I need to know. But for now, hey, I'm well versed on my alternative rock, on my metal, on my hard rock, but I don't know much about other things. Anyway, wow, guys, this is what you're going to expect, though. This is supposed to be about the Pixies, and I've already talked about haters online and how I don't know much about 90s hip-hop, but hey, that's what you can expect on the show. So let's get into Pixies. Pixies' Doolittle is their second studio album. When they first started, they started in 1986 in Boston, and it's Frank Black Francis was the nickname. His real name is Charles Thompson III, but he started going, Charles, and then it became Black Francis, Frank Black. That's been his name in music forever, interchangeably. You see Black Francis, Frank Black. But anyway, he's the front man, lead singer, guitarist, and then you have Kim Deal on bass. And then you have Joey Santiago on the guitar. And then, of course, why am I drawing a blank on the... This is terrible. I'm drawing a blank. His name is the drummer. I got to get it, you guys. Let me get the lineup here. Mr. David Lovering. I knew that. It escaped my brain for a second. David Lovering. That's the Pixies. That's Pixies. The Pixies. Pixies. Gosh, it's so easy to say the in front of it. So they started in 86, and then their first, album that they put out, which was Come On Pilgrim. But that, again, Come On Pilgrim was like a smaller, it wasn't really on a major label. And I'm not mistaken. The problem with both Come On Pilgrim and their first studio album is they got released internationally before they were released stateside. So it was like overseas, they were getting a glimpse of the Pixies before the U.S. was. You know, here's this U.S.-based band, and overseas, they're getting recognition. The song's getting out there. The only way you could get their first studio album at first, Surfer Rosa, was you had to get like an import. And if you remember, if you're my age, you remember like buying import CDs. You had to get to, you know, a record store that was getting those import CDs. You couldn't go to Sam Goody or Tower Records for the most part and find a lot of like really unique, you know, some of those big, well, Tower Records probably in Hollywood you could. But, you know, these big music chain stores, you weren't going to go into a Best Buy or something like that and get these great import CDs. You had to go to a record store, get somebody who had the imports. So it was harder to get a hold of it. But by the time we get to Doolittle, Doolittle is finally released internationally and domestically at the same time. So in a lot of ways, this was like how they broke onto the scene in the biggest way. And this album, I think you would look at and say, if you've never started on the Pixies, in my personal opinion, this is where you start. You start here. Then for me, I started here, then I went back to Surfer Rosa, got Come On Pilgrim, and some of my favorite songs are on the previous albums. It's just, this is such a good, accessible way to learn about their music. It's still all over the place. It's still very chaotic. I'll never forget, my first time really experiencing Pixies was not when the album came out. You'll notice on my reaction video about the song Monkey Gone to Heaven, I wasn't saying that was in, 1988 or whatever when the album came out. It was 1989. It was, in the 90s because Pixies was one of those bands that like your older cousin or your parents' friend leaves you over and you're with you're hanging out with this kid who's 4 or 5 years older than you are, and they're listening to Jane's Addiction and Pixies, and you're like, what's this, And so you were introduced to it like that. But I remember my brother had gotten a cassette copy of Pixies Doolittle for Christmas. And, my brother and I, we share almost exactly the same music taste, little differing. Every now and then he does his own thing and I do my own thing, but for the most part, almost the same. And my brother Joel, he got it for Christmas morning, and I think I'd heard some songs. He and I had found a college radio station in Oklahoma. It was Rogers State College, and he and I had found a way to start taping the radio show onto these little cassette tapes, and that's where we were hearing all sorts of crazy shit, like Dead Kennedys and Dead Milkmen, and we were learning. That's where we were learning about The Cure and a lot of that era of music. Morrissey and the Smiths and all sorts of stuff. Pixies, Jane's Addiction was in there. We were learning about this music, and on this college radio station. And we were pretty young kids, but he got Pixies, and it's Christmas morning, and we go out, and he has this old Camaro. He had, and we went in. He didn't have it very long because my brother's a terrible driver. He won't argue with that. I mean, maybe he's gotten better now. No, you haven't gotten any better, have you? He was a terrible driver. He wasn't able to keep this car very long without messing it up, wrecking it, and then having to get something that could actually take his terrible driving. But we got up Christmas morning. We went in and we put in the cassette tape and we sat in his car, and it was cold. And I remember sitting there and listening. And your first experience in listening to Pixies is that it's loud, quiet, loud. There is a documentary that was made called, Loud, Quiet, Loud. And that really is the perfect way to describe it. It's jarring. It's erratic. It's melodious. It's soft. It takes you somewhere in all sorts of different directions. And in a lot of ways, as I was hearing it, I felt underprepared for it. If that makes any sense. I wasn't ready for it, but I liked it. I didn't know why I liked it, because let me tell you something. That album is full of surrealist lyrics. Frank Black was really into surrealism, and I didn't even know until years later. There were things that were being sung that I had no idea what he was saying or talking about, but it was like, I'm going to really climb at an analogy here. It's like being brought into a art gallery as a young kid, and you're surrounded by beautiful works of art, and you find pieces or you look at something and you're captivated by it, and the people around you will say you should be captivated by it because of this brush stroke style, or this was really groundbreaking art for the time, or the use of color or perspective, and they would explain it to you. But you'd be like, I don't know why, but I'm drawn to it, and I can't put my finger on why. I feel it. I sense it. That's kind of what it felt like, you know? It felt like somebody could explain in a diagram why I liked it, but I would be like, I don't know. He's screaming one minute, then the next minute it's singing very nice and pretty, and that bass is really kind of plucking through the air at me, you know? There's just something about it. Anyway, that's my best way I can put it, I guess. Not very eloquently, Jacob, but, you know, you're trying. Anyway, so Pixies opens up with Debaser. And Debaser it's got such a upbeat, jolly little melody. And he comes in with that screeching, oh, you know, it is just like, man, I wish on podcasts we could just listen to the song together and then talk about it afterwards, but that's not how podcasts work. I'd get flagged every single time, but I wish, you know, I have it right here in front of me. I could just play it, you know. It starts out with this nice little jolly guitar up top. But a lot of the lyrics of Debaser are related to a surrealist film. He had seen at the time... He had seen a surrealist movie. I have it right here because I didn't know this for the longest time. But Frank Black was going through a lot of surreal movies and cinema. That was something he was drawn to. So there was this film that he watched called Un Chien Andalou. And that's what he's saying in the chorus. Un Chien Andalusia. That's like a reference to that film. I really, all those years that I listened to it as a kid, it just sounded like gibberish. And I didn't know this, by the way, but he had almost gone with the words in that part right there in an early version of it. It almost said, shed Apollonia, in reference to Purple Rain. How about that, huh? He almost had it be a reference to Purple Rain, but got more caught up in this surrealist. And that's why he's got the lines about slicing up eyeballs and all that stuff. It's from the surrealist film. So that's where we begin with Debaser. But then we get to Tame. And again, it's that screaming voice that he had that really took me by surprise, but I was mesmerized by it. I almost said memorized by it. Mesmerized. Really, really incredible. And this is like one of those albums that I feel like you could easily sit down with somebody and you could start hitting play and going through it, and they might get to songs like Tame and just be like, what the hell am I listening to? You know? Because if you look at it from a bird's eye point of view, you're like, a lot of this shouldn't make sense, but it does. It does. It resonates and it hits me to the core. Because that scream that he has is, it's unlike most screams. Because I'm really into metal music, of course, and you've got everything from the black metal screeching to those guttural deep growls to hardcore screams. You have very different types of screaming voices that you get used to. But I gotta say, Frank Black's is uniquely his, that's for sure. Then we get to Wave of Mutilation. And, this is a fun, upbeat song, but you want to know what? I didn't know what it was about until just recently. He had been reading about this idea of, being like a Japanese businessman who had failed at business and his career was over, and he's in a car and he just has his family in the car and he drives off the pier into the ocean and kills them all. And that's the Wave of Mutilation. So just thinking of this kind of like this overwhelmed sorrow and feeling of like nothing's worth living for anymore and just driving your car into the ocean. Kind of crazy, right? And yet it's such a like an uplifting, feel-good song and the energy behind it. But the thing about Wave of Mutilation is my favorite version of the song is called Wave of Mutilation UK Surf. And the first time, actually, this might be the first time I heard Pixies, okay, was Pump Up the Volume, the movie with Christian Slater. I'm pretty sure that the first time I saw that film, there's a very, a kind of a quiet moment in the film where they play Pixies' Wave of Mutilation, UK Surf. And the thing about that version of the song is it's very slowed down. It's acoustic. The pacing of it is just really slow. And then there's this clean guitar picking, like surf guitar, but it's very echoey and it's very daydreamy. It really lulls you. And it's just this beautiful moment in the film. And I remember just being drawn to it. And I learned that it was called Wave of Mutilation. And I remember when we got to the album, I was like, oh, here comes Wave of Mutilation. And then comes this, this really upbeat song. I was like, wait a second, that's not the one from the film. But love the UK surfer version. So I sought it out and I bought it on the Here Comes Your Man record single. You could get the UK surf on vinyl. And I still have it and I love it so much. I'm so proud of it. It's pretty beat up. Not the record, the case is pretty beat up because it's been with me since the 90s and it's traveled many a states, many a places, college, life, been through hell and back. But anyway, I love that song. I Bleed, another great one that starts out with that iconic bass, coming from Kim Deal. A cool story about Kim Deal. Kim and Kelly Deal, Kim and her sister Kelly Deal started the band The Breeders. And The Breeders are great. I have gone back and listened to Last Splash. That album holds up. It is great. And they've also got The Pod, which is also Steve Albini produced, I'm pretty sure. Steve Albini, famous record producer, produced In Utero. Lots of other albums. He produced their first album, Surfer Rosa. But on this one, on Doolittle, it was Gil Norton, something like that. I'm probably messing that up. An English chap. Anyway, we're on to I Bleed, that iconic bass. And I was going to tell a story about Kim Deal. So my wife in the early 2000s, she was an actress. She is an actress, but she got a chance to work. We were young in our 20s. We didn't have kids yet. And she was working on the TV show American Dreams. And American Dreams was on NBC, and it was about American Bandstand, and it was throwing back to the 60s. And she was an extra, but her extra involvement on the show, she was in the bleachers for the American Bandstand sequences, and she worked on it so frequently that she became one of the regulars, one of the bandstand dancers, was on every time they shot for that thing, got to know some of the cast members, got a line on the show, was featured. So she got at least involved enough in that season that you saw her all the time on the show. Anyway, that one of the things they used to do on that TV show was bring in artists, like popular artists, and have them play the band during American Bandstand. And one day she's there and she calls me and she tells me, and she's like, Jacob, the Breeders are the guest band. And I was losing my mind because I was like, I cannot believe that you're going to hang out with Kim Deal today. And so she got a chance really to hang out with Kelly Deal. So Kelly and my wife Jamie were just kind of like palsing around the whole day. And I still have on a sheet of paper from Kelly, it says, Jacob, why aren't you here? Kelly Deal. I always thought that was so cool. I've never gotten a chance to meet any of the band of Pixies, but just that connection to Kelly Deal I thought was pretty awesome. That cherished possession of mine. So Kelly, if you ever hear this, thank you for that. Thanks for hanging out with my wife all day on set of American Dreams. Anyway, Here Comes Your Man. Here Comes Your Man. You know, as you read and learn more about these songs, Here Comes Your Man, I like that song. And yet it's funny because it turns out that Frank Black wrote it when he was like 15 years old. And he was always kind of ashamed of it because it was poppy, it was catchy. The band referred to it as that Tom Petty sounding song, very accessible. And, every time it was kind of on deck for the album. So Come On Pilgrim, Surfer Rosa. But everybody was like, no, it's just trying too hard. It's just poppy and not really what the band is trying to be. But then when they get to recording Doolittle, the producer, Norton, at the time, he was like, I like that song. And so Frank Black was like, well, throw him a bone, let him have it on the record. So he did, and it made it on there. And I got to tell you, if they still have any kind of like, I don't want to play this song because it's hokey, I don't know. I think you got to get over it. You know what I mean? It's a good song. Yes, it's catchy. Yes, it's poppy. Yes, it's got that feel good. But I think at this point, it's a classic. So Pixies, if you're not playing Here Comes Your Man, you should start playing Here Comes Your Man. You know what I'm saying? It's coming from Jacob Givens. He's telling you right now, you got to do it. So anyway, I was trying to find the record producer so I could see Norton. Yeah, there it is, Norton. Gil Norton. I think I said it right. Maybe I said something else. Anyway, Gil Norton was the one who produced this. But anyway, so they finally put it on the album. And that's the thing. During the recording of Doolittle, Gil Norton kept trying to kind of embellish during the post-production and the engineering of the record. He kept trying to, layer it up, expand, and lengthen some songs. And as the story goes that I read, is Frank Black took him to Black Francis took him to a record store and picked up a Buddy Holly record and showed him Buddy Holly songs and how they were just like 2 minutes long. And he was like, if it's good enough for Buddy Holly, it's good enough for me. So he was like really trying to sell the point, like, we do not have to make these songs super long. If they're short and sweet, let's stick to it. And that really does help with making this record very accessible. This is a great doorway. If you don't know anything about the band, you jump in here. I think that this is a good way to get to know them right out of the gate. Then you've got songs after Here Comes Your Man, like Dead, totally different, crazy direction, which is biblical references. There's some biblical references on this album, on Dead and Gouge Away. Basically, here, I had it right here. I had to look up some of these things, guys, because I didn't know all this. The Dead has lyrical elements that are talking about David and Bathsheba. And then on Gouge Away at the end, that's Samson and Delilah. So, hey, how about that? Little biblical references. I guess it was because when Frank Black was a young lad, his family got involved in an evangelical church that was tied to Assemblies of God. And so that really kind of added a little element. Oh, yeah, I wanted to mention that part that I learned. Oh, I'm almost there. It's almost next. So I didn't want to jump the gun because we were on Dead. But now we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Monkey Gone to Heaven. Monkey Gone to Heaven is, it's an environmental song. It's really about the environment and kind of humanity wreaking havoc on the planet. You can hear it from the words. Got killed by 10,000 pounds of sludge from New York and New Jersey. God, I love this record so much. I love it. It stays with you. But that song's about environmentalism. But I want to talk a little bit about the most recognizable part of that song and why I chose it for my first time hearing reaction video. If man is 5, then the devil is 6, and then again God is 7. That part that stuck out to me immediately. That has stayed with me since. That screaming on and God is 7. I use in my car to this day. I just yelp out at that part. It's just such a cool part. But there's a little bit of mythology around it. I've seen several people comment to me, and then I've gone digging online. They claim, and this is what the claim was, that Daniel Johnston was playing a small acoustic show, and Frank Black was in the audience. And then while Daniel Johnston was just kind of in the ethos and just feeling the feels in his mind, he started saying things about man is 5 and the devil is 6, and that's where Frank Black got it. But I gotta say, I don't know. I don't buy it, because the only places that I see that said are Redditor comments, like somebody says it. Now, that could very well be like in a documentary that I've never seen before, but in all the press that I read about the actual song, again, this was an example of the numerology that he had learned being, and exposed to biblical stories and going to that evangelical church and really writing from that standpoint. There's even stories about him waking up Joey Santiago and showing him that song that he had just, come up with, like waking up Joey in the morning and being like, check this out. And Joey, him having the part about if man is 5. So I don't know. You can challenge me on that. You can come after me on the social medias and say, no, you're wrong. But I don't know. Unless you're literally somebody who is like related to Frank Black and firsthand experience that's how it went down, I'm beginning to think that's just like an urban legend. Daniel Johnston has all this kind of like all these crazy things about his life because it is so unusual. It is so strange. But I believe it just came from Mr. Frank Black himself in his own mind, and I think maybe it's coincidental. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, when they made that movie, Loud, Quiet, Loud, what I think is so funny about it, that if you haven't seen it yet, it's this great documentary about the Pixies. because they are each album is coming out, and then they break up in 1992, 6 years after forming, and they're not on their way out. They just was too much tension in the band. And so they break up. And so when they got back together in 2003, 2004, they made a documentary called Loud, Quiet, Loud. And it's a really great documentary. One of the most fascinating scenes, you can see the tension amongst the bandmates. You can see that it is a tense environment for them to be in, and why they would have the splits. But the one scene that I always think about is David Lovering, the drummer. He's trying to be clean and sober, and then he goes on tour with the band, and there's a scene where they're playing live, and he's just playing this end of the song. He's playing like really intense drum part, and they're done. They're ready to like go to the next part of the song, and he just keeps going, and you kind of go like, oh no, oh no. The dude's back on some stuff to help get him through all this. It's pretty heartbreaking. It's pretty sad to see how grueling it can be on them. But they are a legendary band, and everybody was thrilled beyond belief. Pixies are playing now. After that period of time, I think Kim Deal finally split out and took out, left the band in 2013. And they now have Paz Lechanton. I hope I'm not butchering her name, but she's playing with the band now, and she has since like 2013, 2014. But anyway, so you can see the tension. But what I was going to say is Loud, Quiet, Loud. I'll never forget. I was in high school, and I was showing my buddy Kevin Brayman. I was showing him another artist that I liked at the time. And I was saying, check this out. You got to listen to this song. You're going to love it. And I'll never forget. I showed it to him, and he was like, of course you like it. It goes, loud, quiet. And this is before that documentary was made. This is like in the 90s that he's telling me this. And it was so true. That was such a good summation of the kind of music that I liked. I like things that were loud and quiet. Pumpkins, I love that distorted guitars that then just drops into dreamy, ethereal guitar, soft, quiet, and then gets loud. I mean, that sums up my musical taste my whole life. So I love that story. Still think about that all the time, Kev. Anyway, so let's keep trucking along here because we're getting through. We still have a good amount of songs, and I don't really have a lot of facts and information on every single song. I have a little bit, but not enough to get, to go for another half hour talking about these. But Mugging on Heaven, then Mr. Greaves. I don't know if I know necessarily what in the world Mr. Greaves is about. I know there's one coming up about his roommate. It just says more underwater themes in Mr. Greaves. Crackety Jones is the one about he had a really crazy roommate during his exchange trip in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Frank Black did. And so that song's about his crazy roommate. So then, we don't know much about Mr. Greaves. La La Love You. La La Love You is featuring the vocals of the drummer, David Lovering. He's the one singing there. And at first, he didn't want to do it really, but then they encouraged him. And that's like that song that you hear it, and it does have such a different feel to it. And you can tell somebody else is behind the microphone doing, all I'm saying, pretty baby. It's like a guy crooning. Then number 13, baby. Got a tattooed tit. Then number 13. These were so controversial as a young boy. Whenever you would hear like a word, not an overt F-bomb or, just a flat out swear, people saying things like tit in songs. Ooh, so exciting. So exciting. Not to mention, hey, let's not forget about, and I know this is about Doolittle and not Surfer Rosa, but man, there was a thing back then. I've told you my parents were strict about language. If an album cover had boobies on the cover, oh, forget about it. I can't buy that. How am I going to have that in my tape collection, in my CD collection? Not in my household. So Surfer Rosa, that was, hidden. I think I had a copy of it. And then Jane's Addiction, nothing shocking. Another one, Ritual de la Habitual, hidden. Whenever you put bare breasts on an album cover, it was like I was appreciative. I enjoyed it as a lad, but I had to hide it, So that's just how it was. I don't know. Parents always being nervous about what their kids are consuming content-wise, I guess. Then we get down to There Goes My Gun. I don't really have anything in terms of, facts or statistics on this. Oh, Hey, the next song. That's one of my favorite songs. Hey, been trying to meet you. Oh, whores in my head, whores at the door, whores in my bed. What a great song. I could just say that to myself walking alone, just kind of say those words. And he does the word chained. I'm not able to sing it right now, but it's so great. Silver is Kim Deal and Frank Black singing together, and she co-wrote that song, and she's playing the slide guitar, and David Lovering is playing the bass. And it was really the only one on the record. And that was kind of one of the reasons why there was some tension, is that obviously Kim Deal. Kim Deal is obviously a fantastic songwriter, obviously, very talented, does her own thing. And so I think there was a point of tension there in the band, obviously, because she's such a great songwriter and talented. Also, that, there wasn't a place in Pixies for her music, at least at the time, not allowed by Mr. Frank Black. So it was, you eventually have to go out and on your own and do your own thing. And she has, and she's done it great. She's fantastic. But then we get to the end of the record with Gouge Away. And this is, I remember Gouge Away. This was one of those ones I told you earlier about my brother and I popping in the cassette tape, taping off that college radio station. Gouge Away was on one of those tapes before we owned any of the albums. I remember Gouge Away was on there. And that's, again, more biblical references, more biblical stuff, lots of biblical stuff on the album. And that's a good old Samson and Delilah. So that's pretty much Pixies' Doolittle. And, I know I have some facts here, not all the songs I can sit here and tell you backstories and information about. And I guess I should learn my lesson on that. Don't feel the need like you got to do every single one. We can just talk about the overview. But in my video that I made of the reaction of the Pixies, if you haven't seen it, it was basically me sitting in the car. And I did that on purpose because of how my brother and I listened to the tape the first time. But I made this little joke. I said, oh, Doolittle, that's the character I played in My Fair Lady. And somebody in the comments was like, Eliza Doolittle? And I'm like, no, if you know the musical, I was the dad. I was Doolittle the father, the one who says, I'm getting married in the morning, get me to the church on time, with a little bit of luck. With a little bit of luck, that was the character I played. So I was Doolittle the dad, and so I made that joke in there that I said, oh, I was Doolittle, and then the other version of me is like, what? And then I say, never mind. And that was a little tip of the hat to the inspiration of Nirvana's music from Pixies. So that was a couple layers, guys. That's the kind of stuff I'm bringing you. It's layers. It's like you think I'm doing one thing, but then there's another thing and another thing. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes it's really the surface and exactly what it is. But every now and then it has layers. But guys, that was Pixies' Doolittle, and it's a great record. I love it so much. I need to get on vinyl. That would be a good one to have on vinyl. I don't think, besides the single that I have of Here Comes Your Man with UK Surf, Wave of Mutilation, that one also has Into the White on it, and Anna, I think. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, I need to pick it up. But thank you guys so much for joining me for yet again another fun episode of Waterproof Records. I had a blast. I hope you did too. And we'll see you next time.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna